Hey, how's it going? Hey, let's take a look at this photograph of my ancestors. Yeah. So let's go through and take a look at this. This is a picture of my mother and her parents and her sisters and her brothers. And as you can see, there are a lot of them. So seated are my grandparents, Manuel and Mary, and on their laps, on the left, that's my mother, Carmen, and she's the second to the youngest. And then on the right, sitting on my grandfather Manuel's lap, is my uncle Dick, and he is the youngest. Uh, Everyone in this picture, as of about 2 months ago, is now deceased. My mother passed away at the end of August, and she was 100 years old. Pretty amazing. But my grandmother, whose lap she's sitting on, she lived to be 100, I almost said 104, but I think it was 102. So she lived to be 102. But anyway, let's look, shall we? So so yeah, this is about 1925, I think, maybe 1926. My mom is about 3 or 4 years old right there. She was born in 1922, and then, as I mentioned, she just passed away. So I'm gonna guess she's 3 or 4 right here, right? By the looks of her, and then my uncle Dick is probably 2 or 3, right? So let's go through everybody because obviously I know everybody, and since we know it's 1925, um, it's just exciting. It's interesting looking at how everyone is dressed, and you know, um, I'm not sure where this picture is being taken at. Um, I'm gonna I'm gonna guess this is taken at. Would this have been taken at a photo studio? Maybe in Modesto. What a trek that would have been to how many different in the 20s did they have cars? You would have had to take three different cars, or how many? I don't know. Is this the ranch? I don't know. Is this indoors or is this at a photo studio? That looks like a window behind them, a leaded glass window. So I think this is at the ranch at the big house, but I could be completely wrong. I don't know. But on the far left is my aunt Madge. Her name is Madeline, but we always called her Madge, Madge, and she was the sweetest of women, and she was an incredibly super talented painter and artist. I mean, really, really good. Uh, she, when I knew her, she was probably in her 60s and 70s, and even older. I'm not quite sure. She was born with. Let's see if we can notice. She was born with one leg significantly shorter than the other. Can't really see here. And I mean significantly by an inch or two. And so her whole life into adulthood, she always wore these special shoes that had this large sole and heel on one side. Um, but when I knew her, she lived in a little house in Pacific Grove, California, and she painted the ocean just about every day. And she would take her easel and a little folded up chair and all of her painting equipment, and she would walk to the beach, which was only a couple blocks from the house where she lived. She would set up in the sand dunes and she would paint. And she was a beautiful, beautiful lady, and I loved hanging out with her, and I loved her house and her yard. This is my Uncle George. Uh, he spent his almost his entire adult life living here in the city of San Francisco, working as a mailman. He was a medic in the Army, just like I was a medic in the Army. He served in World War II. Uh, he was always super cool and super nice to me. Um, and I remember he collected things too. Similar, he had little toys and things. The one thing that I remember that he had that was the coolest thing that I remember from their house, they had a house in the Mission District that was like a row house that, back in the 70s, my mother used to like look down upon that, because she thought everyone should live in the suburbs in new houses. But he had this curio cabinet, long curio cabinet that was built into the wall and ran along the entire hall of the entryway. Anyway, inside of there, one of the coolest things that I remember he had that he showed me. Look at how beautiful my Aunt Madge was. She was beautiful. Um, anyway, he had he had this cigarette roller that was a donkey, and it was like made of celluloid, like pre-plastic, I think. And it was a burro that had these open knapsacks on each side, and you put on one side you would put cigarette tobacco, and on the other side you would feed in cigarette rolling papers, and the donkey or the burro's tail rotated, and as you rotated its tail, uh, inside the cigarette rolling machine would spin, and it would roll a cigarette, and the cigarette would be extruded out of the donkey's butthole. It was one of the coolest things I'd ever seen in my life. This is my Aunt Emily right there in the center, kind of wearing that kind of Oriental style, which is interesting because, when I knew her, she always loved Oriental style. She loved the islands, she loved Hawaii, she loved the South Pacific, and a lot of her house was decorated. Well, at least not a lot of it. I take that back. She had a large enclosed patio, like a big, a really big patio, and it was filled with tiki and Polynesian style and Japanese style furniture. Lots of black and red lacquer, lots of screens, lots of cranes and storks and dragons. And this was the aunt that was, of all of them, and I mean, I loved them all dearly. She was my favorite. She was the one who I spent the most time with as a kid. Um, my Aunt Emily right here. For some reason, I can't get it to get bigger and focus. Um, I spent the most time with her as a kid, and I wanted to live with her and her husband, my Uncle Johnny. Uh, when I was a kid, I wanted to live with them. This is my Aunt Clarice. She was so sweet and so awesome. Uh, she was a super duper athlete, and she had this beautiful skin. You can even see right there, she already has, I mean, she has this tan, but she was very dark skinned and an incredible swimmer. And her husband used to manage a gun club, a large gun club. And there was a huge swimming pool there, like a big, beautiful swimming pool. And she swam every day and was out in the sun every day. And then she cooked these giant breakfasts and lunches every day for all these duck hunters. And she managed like a big hunting lodge. She was one of my favorites. She's super sweet, super duper sweet. Um, yeah. This is my Aunt Rose. Uh, just like a heart of gold. This lady would just cook all day for you. And she loved to play cards. And she was very sweet. This is my Uncle Joe. I didn't really know him that well. He's the oldest son, and he took over the family business for my grandfather. Um, there's such a huge age difference between him and my mother, and even my cousins that are his children are all like just as old as my mom. You know what I mean? Or for me growing up, so I have almost excuse me, no connection to my Uncle Joe, with the exception that it was a tradition for every single family reunion every summer. He was in charge of Simon Says, and he was excellent at doing Simon Says, like really, really good. And like an entire group of like 20 or 30 or 40 kids, he would make it into this big long game and whittle it down, and he would like insult and rib kids and mess with kids, and it was all like this, like based upon like family lore and stuff like that. He was very, very witty, very funny, very smart guy. This is my Aunt Kay, or Catherine. uh, she's street smart and funny and cool. She drove a Gran Torino. She drove a Ford Gran Torino, a souped up one, like I don't know, like a 442 or something in there. Um, she she came from gosh, I don't know how to say it. So she was great at street smart stuff. She could manage a restaurant, a bar, a casino. She could speak Spanish. She could make fresh homemade tortillas. If you needed to go to Mexico for something, this is who you would want to take with you. Um, she'd be able to take you to the best places to find the least expensive restaurant supplies or hotel supplies to bring back to help your business in California. I'm just putting that out there. Okay, this is my Aunt May. Just all of them are sweet. All of them are sweet. And Aunt May was just as sweet, if not more sweet, than all of them. What can I say about Aunt May? She baked incredible cookies, and they had a really big house, a big, beautiful, like Adobe style house. Um, yeah, just a really nice one. My grandfather, who I really never knew, I was just too small, but he came to America when he was 18 from Saint George, an island in the Azores Islands off the coast of Portugal, and he married into wealth, but he also worked his way up. He kind of when he was young and he married my grandmother, um, there was like a dowry. He was given land and cattle, and a number of cattle, and then and yeah. So I mean, he built from that. He built his own little empire. You can see. Look at all these kids, and and keep in mind this guy's a rancher, and he's got almost nothing but daughters. So he's got two sons to do all the work at the ranch, and then he's got all these daughters, which is like when you're a farmer or a rancher, almost the reason why you have kids is to is for them to be able to work. But look, and so as there became more of the daughters, and he became more prosperous, the younger daughters worked even less. And I'm just telling, I mean, this is just the story of this family. And so the younger children, maybe in the eyes of some of the older children, I would just say, especially perhaps maybe my Uncle Joe, he felt that some of these younger kids were all spoiled, because they never had to do anything. They never even went and gathered eggs. None of them had to milk cows. None of them had to do any of that. Because this business, my grandfather was successful, so there were ranch hands, and yeah, they did very well. There was my mother used to tell me that, so there was a cook named Cook, that she didn't get along with. My mother told me, and then also all of their dresses were handmade by a seamstress for them. Um, cool, huh? And this is like also this is the Depression. My uncle Dick, he was a belly gunner in World War II in I don't know, a B-20. Is it a 29, or I always get the numbers wrong about those bombers in World War II. Anyway, he was a World War II veteran, and he made it home, and spent his life working a career at Safeway in the produce department, and he was a nice guy. I really liked my Uncle Dick. This is my Aunt Helen. She's awesome, super sweet, super funny, a great cook. Also very much attached to the outdoors and hunting, and they had a complete full indoor bar in their house, in their living room. I mean, a full bar, like a full size bar with made of black cushioned leather with about 6 or 8 bar stools, and the back of the bar was like a full professional bar that had a window, a pass-through window that went through into the kitchen and into the kitchen sink, so you could pass stuff through. And yeah. In the center is my Aunt Virginia. We always called her Aunt Jin. She's the next youngest, closest to my mother's older sister. My mother and my Aunt Jin were very close growing up and in their teenage years. My Aunt Jin was super awesome, super funny, super sweet, and gosh, so much to say about them. Anyway, they lived in San Diego, and they had a beautiful house in San Diego, and they had a fallout shelter in their backyard. A real life, real deal, serious fallout shelter, you guys. That they built, that my uncle built. He always was doing things like that. Her husband, my uncle Ed, was a genius, and he built a full on, like, I mean, a bunker, a cement bunker buried in the backyard underground, just like in the movies, a real professional fallout shelter. And yeah, and I'm sure it's still there. I believe my cousin still owns the house, and the fallout shelter is still there. I think it's a dark room now. I think it was converted into a dark room. This is my Aunt Millie. Where is she? She's right there. Who I've talked about before in some of my videos. I think I've mentioned my Aunt Millie. She's super sweet, super funny, super cool, and she had an innocence about her that was almost Edith Bunker like in a way. But she did have street smarts mixed in. But she was just very innocent and sweet. And then this is my mother and my grandmother. My grandmother was very sweet to me, always, even in her old age. She was always nice. My mother, I've talked about several times, multiple times in my videos. She was beautiful. You can see she was a beautiful child, and she was her whole life really actually beautiful. Um, and yeah, so that's it. We took a look at where's Aunt Mary? There she is. Took a look at the Reese family. Um, yeah, so there's one more. There were 14. My Aunt Mabel, she died when she was 7 from scarlet fever, and she's not pictured here. Hope you guys enjoyed this. Thanks for watching, and I will talk to you guys later.